Hi everyone. I can hardly believe it, but here we are chatting about the astrology of June 2021. I know, I don't know how we're at June either, and I feel like I say this at the beginning of every month of this belief that how are we talking about the beginning of a month? But here we are. And so June begins kind of on a sensitive note and maybe perhaps even an overwhelming note. Mercury just went retrograde at the end of May, and we're kind of sandwiched between two eclipses. We had a full moon eclipse at the end of May, and we are going to have a lunar eclipse coming up on June 10th. That's going to be a new moon. And so we're kind of in this in-between energy, this energy of change and disruption and upheaval and bringing things to light. And we may just want to stick our head in the sand, look the other way, and just it's kind of that feeling of just wanting to pull the blanket over your head. That may be how you feel. And if that's how you feel, please do not be hard on yourself. Treat yourself with, gentle kindness. I want to remind you that Mars is still in Cancer as I'm recording this, and as through the beginning of June, Mars will still be in Cancer, and so that can also kind of already have us primed for being sensitive, being almost hyper aware of threats or anything that can feel threatening, anything that we imagine could be threatening, where we, might concoct these stories in our head of like doom and gloom and how things could go wrong with Mars in Cancer. Mars does not like being in Cancer, and so that already just has us maybe feeling funky or sensitive or overwhelmed. So just hang tight. This energy will shift. We will not be here forever. And so moving on, I'm going to just start going date by date as things will be coming up throughout the month. So on June 2nd, that will be our last quarter moon. And so this is, to me, really important to kind of pay attention to because it is the last quarter moon before the new moon solar eclipse on June 10th. And so it's really a time to slow down, to reflect, to release, just release, like anything that is holding you back, that no longer serves you, that's weighing you down, that you're just like, I am done carrying this weight. I am done. Now's the time to let it go. Also on the 2nd, the Sun will sextile Chiron, which is a transit that really reinforces the need to make self-care a priority. And then kind of echoing that on the same day, this is all the same day, Venus will enter Cancer. And so this echoes the Sun sextile Chiron transit, where with Venus in Cancer, we're going to find our value and our pleasure in tending to our needs and desires. And so right off the bat, as we enter June, there is really an emphasis on slowing down, of taking kind of our lens, our outlook, and instead of it being, looking outward, kind of looking at our surroundings, to turn it and reflect on ourselves and look at ourselves and what we need and how, what we need to do to kind of maybe come back to balance or just actually tend to our needs. I feel like perhaps for many of us, as we've been moving through spring and we're getting close to summer, that for us in the Northern Hemisphere, I know not everyone who listens is in the Northern Hemisphere, but the transit is still the same. You're just different seasons. But I feel like we've been very perhaps productivity focused, and that we may be feeling a little burned out, and that the energy right now is really calling us to slow down and tend to our needs and tend to our physical and emotional and spiritual bodies, and not just kind of get that, that laser focus on our goals and achievements and what am I going to do today to get to my goal. I think the energy right now is asking us to take a step back from that. It's not saying we're going to take a step back forever, but just for right now, the energy kind of comes and goes in waves. And I think right now we're kind of at a point where we need to tend to ourselves. On June 3rd, the sun will trine Saturn. And that can be a moment where we are rewarded or recognized for the efforts we have been putting in. We're being recognized for our hard work, and it kind of helps us see the work that still needs to be done. The same day, June 3rd, Venus will trine Jupiter, which just helps boost our overall optimism and compassion for others. So that's just a nice, lovely transit. On June 5th, Mercury will square Neptune. And so that can be a little of a tight spot, a trouble spot this month is June 5th, because Mercury square Neptune generally makes things foggy and unclear. But also we have to keep in mind that Mercury is retrograde right now, and so that kind of adds like a double whammy, a double dose of confusion or unclear. That could be a day where it's really easy to misunderstand someone or miscommunicate and kind of have setbacks or delays because of that misunderstanding. The same day, June 5th, again, this is adding to the kind of just put right down on your calendar about June 5th and just, it's a heads up day, because Mars will oppose Pluto the same day. And that is a really competitive energy. That's where you're just kind of raring to go for a fight. You want to pick a fight. We're really passionate and want to if someone says something that we disagree with, we want to tell them that we disagree with it. It's not enough that we disagree. We want to tell them, and we have to tell them why they're, maybe go so tell them why they're wrong. And so let's just be aware of that. Don't pick a fight where you don't need to pick a fight. Stay out of it if you can. And then that leads us to June 10th, which is our new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. And I'm actually going to go pretty in depth into the new and full moon in this monthly forecast, because I'm actually planning on taking not so much taking June off, because I'm still going to be working, but I'm not going to do as much work. I'm not going to be doing the weekly forecast in June. I'm only going to do this monthly forecast. And so I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here into the new and full moon. And so on June 10th, we have our new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. And this eclipse is a lot. This new moon in particular is conjunct Mercury, which means it's kind of sitting right next to Mercury in the sky. And it's also squaring Neptune. And so this eclipse is really going to bring up for us how we're doing things that really don't serve us, how we're doing things that kind of are no longer working, where we can't ignore it anymore. We can't put our head in the sand anymore. This is also because of the Gemini influence. I really see this eclipse as being a time where, because Gemini is the sign of the twins, and so we may see that this eclipse forces some people to show the world their, other side, quote unquote, that they keep hidden from the spotlight, where, self-professed gurus and thought leaders basically find their pedestals kind of collapsing under the weight of their ego. It's the big names, the big leaders that we may look to for guidance, where we find something about them, something is revealed under the light of this eclipse that makes us see them in a different light and see maybe a different aspect of their personality that we didn't see before. And this doesn't just apply to those in the spotlight. We may find ourselves caught up in the fanfare and suddenly realizing that we had, the wool pulled over our eyes and we weren't really seeing someone for who they were. And that could be uncomfortable because then we have to reckon what we thought we knew with the information that we now have to work with. And we may feel like we were cheated or taken advantage of or fooled somehow. And it's up to us to choose how we use this information, how we integrate it, and kind of how we use this new data in our lives. And like I mentioned, this eclipse is conjunct, or, it's kind of right at the same spot in the sky as Mercury, which will be retrograde still at the time of this eclipse. And that suggests we may have trouble finding words or finding the right way to communicate what we're trying to say or what we think. It may feel like we're having to really fight or struggle to find our voice, to speak up, to use our voice. Or it may be that it's really hard for your thoughts to really crystallize and form, and you're having a hard time not only using your voice, but communicating or translating your thoughts into words. And it's important to not beat yourself up if you find yourself feeling this way, and give yourself time to let your thoughts just marinate. You'll find the words you need in time, perhaps once Mercury turns direct on June 22nd. And so if you want, it might be a good idea to keep a log of ideas or things you want to say, but you just want to kind of hold off on acting on them until once the fog lifts, once Mercury retrograde is over on June 22nd. And even more kind of muddying the waters here for this new moon eclipse, we have Neptune will be squaring the sun, the moon, and Mercury during this eclipse, which just adds like a blanket of confusion and just this overall feeling that things aren't really clear right now, that we might not have all of the information. And then Saturn is in the wings of this lunar chart, trying to add some definition to what we're seeing, trying to add some boundaries. It's almost like this eclipse, a good analogy is like this eclipse and a lot of the planets and the way they're interacting. It's almost like a muddy watercolor. And Saturn comes along with like a fine tipped ink pen and is trying to like add definition and lines so we can actually like make out shapes in the watercolor. And so that's what Saturn is doing here in this chart, and it's trying to help us stay on course. It's trying to help us like find our boundaries. But overall, around the time of this eclipse, and even throughout Mercury retrograde season, but definitely around the time of this eclipse, it's just not a good time to make really important choices or decisions, especially things that have to like be set in stone, because there is just a lot of confusion and fogginess and a general lack of clarity around the energy of this eclipse. So on June 11th, Mars will enter Leo, which will be a lovely change of pace because Mars has been in Cancer and kind of having us all feel a little sensitive and wanting to just stay at home. But with Mars in Leo, that kind of brings some fun and excitement to our energy, where we really want to follow our heart and follow our pleasure, where we're going to really be rewarded for doing things that we find pleasurable or things that we are really passionate about. That's what you want to set your energy on, set your sights on. Mars is the planet of action and willpower, and so just think about channeling your energy, focusing your energy and all the things you do towards whatever you find pleasurable or whatever you are passionate about during the next few weeks. June 13th, Venus will sextile Uranus and the Sun will square Neptune. And so this is a day where you might get some news, unexpected news, or something will change in your relationships or something to do with money. That's Venus sextile Uranus. You may get like a windfall of money. You may just be walking down the street and find like a dollar bill. And then Sun square Neptune really boosts our imagination and creativity, but it can be hard to focus and get things done. So this can be a really good time for some creative brainstorming, but I wouldn't put too much effort into like trying to hash something out and get something concretely done. On June 14th, Saturn will square Uranus, and this is the second time this has happened this year. It'll happen 3 times this year. The first time was February 17th, and then it will also happen again later this year on December 24th. In this transit, Saturn square Uranus is really flavoring 2021 for all of us, as it symbolizes tearing away the old and outdated, kind of dismantling old structures that no longer serve us. And then once we tear everything away and clear out the rubble, coming together despite our differences and finding solutions to the problems at hand instead of ignoring them and hoping they go away. And so we might find around this date, that there may be something in the news, there may be something about something changing, something shifting, something being updated where something is going to be done in a new and different way. On June 17th, we have our first quarter moon. Typically, a first quarter moon is a time to take action towards whatever intention you set at the new moon. But if you remember what I said about the new moon, which is a lunar eclipse in Gemini, and how we may have a lot of confusion around this time. We may not have a lot of clarity to work with. And so you may find that you had a difficult time choosing your intention for your new moon, especially because it's in Gemini. And so you may find that you don't have a concrete intention, or you didn't set an intention to work with at the first quarter moon. And if you didn't, that is totally, completely, 100% fine. You do not have to set an intention every month. So if it didn't feel right for you this month to set one, that is 100% totally fine. I don't set one every month. You listen to you and do what feels right for you. Otherwise, if you did set one, you know the drill. If you've been listening to me for a while, you want to take action around this time that helps you get closer to your intention. So what action steps, what concrete things can you do that would help you move towards that intention? On June 20th, Jupiter retrograde will begin, and that will last for 4 months. Anytime I mention a retrograde, people always panic a little. Don't panic. They happen every year, except for Mars retrograde, which happens about every 2 years. It's totally fine. But Jupiter retrograde, we don't feel as deeply as we would, say, Mercury retrograde, because the planet Jupiter is further away from us. But overall, this is a time to review or reevaluate your beliefs, especially the beliefs you may have absorbed from the people around you, from your friends, from your family, from the media and society, and turn inward, look inside for your own wisdom and truth, and review what it is that you truly believe. June 20th is also the summer solstice for us in the Northern Hemisphere. It's when the sun enters the sign of Cancer. And so the sun entering Cancer, happy birthday to all the Cancer babies out there. This is a time where all of us collectively are a little more inclined to stick at home, where we may be evaluating our home situation, where we live, who we live with, We may be wanting to kind of redo or redecorate our home at this time to make it feel more like a safe haven, make it feel a little bit more like a reflection of us. We want to feel secure and safe and protected in our home. And so those may be themes that come up for us. It's also a time where the theme of family comes up, where we're looking at who is our family, who we call family. That doesn't have to be people we are, related to by blood. And how we show those that we call family, how we show them that we love them, how we nourish them, how we nourish those relationships. On June 21st, Venus will trine Neptune, and that's just a lovely transit that has this really kind of healing and loving vibe to it. So that could be a nice day. On June 22nd, the day you've all been waiting for, Mercury will turn direct. And so on and for the next couple weeks after this day, you should find that you're getting a little bit more clarity. And as each day goes by, you'll get even more clarity and finally kind of see the big picture, see where you want to go next, see what you need to do. Things kind of fall into place finally. On June 23rd, the Sun will trine Jupiter, and that's just a nice boost to our self-esteem and our outlook, where we're a little bit more just optimistic. And the same day, Venus will oppose Pluto. And this is a little tricky because we have two transits happening that are very opposite energies of each other, so you may find yourself with a little bit of emotional whiplash. On June 23rd, it's another heads-up day. Because Venus opposite Pluto, we may find ourselves feeling overwhelmed. We may be suspicious of others around us, especially those that we are in close or intimate relationships with. We may be distrustful. And, in this kind of situation, it can be a suspicion that is based on reality, or it could be kind of a story in our mind that we've been telling ourselves that somehow it's kind of being triggered. And so it's just important to be mindful of that. And, if something does occur, something does come up for you, to try not to react to it in the moment and give yourself a moment to step back and breathe and, try to look at the information that you concretely have in front of you. On June 24th, we have our full moon in Capricorn. And just like we had Mercury retrograde playing a part in the new moon earlier this month, we now have a big theme of Saturn retrograde playing a part in this full moon. The retrogrades are kind of the theme of the month. That's why at the beginning of this recording, I talked about how I kind of looked at this month, the month ahead, and the themes for me that were coming up were really about slowing down and tending to your needs of all of you, not just your needs of being productive and having your goals met, but also your spiritual, your emotional, your physical needs. And the reason I'm saying Saturn retrograde is going to play a big part in the full moon this month is the full moon is in the sign of Capricorn, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And since Saturn is currently retrograde, we may find that delays are popping up around this time, where we're basically maybe hearing no a lot, but it's important to remember we may be hearing no, but it may not be no exactly. It may just be not right now. And it's also important to remember that Saturn is in Aquarius right now, which reminds us that delays, although very frustrating, are perhaps for the best for us in the long term. Because a Capricorn full moon deals with our long-term vision, checking things off our list, as well as how we get things done within the structure and rules of our day that we've set up, and, the larger picture of society. And so whatever delays could be coming up for you around this time, although you're bound to maybe be angry or frustrated or disappointed because of them, we have to remind ourselves that while we as human beings have a vision and have goals, we can't see the whole picture. We have no idea what's really going to happen in the future. We have no clue who's going to come into our lives to help us reach our goals and fulfill our vision. We don't know how it's going to work out. As much as we try to plan it, and I have a lot of Virgo in my chart and I'm very much a planner, we really don't know how things are really going to fall into place. And so it's important to remember when delays and hiccups do come up that maybe it's for the best and we don't know it because we can't see it. We don't know what's going to happen. And so you might find, a month from now, a year from now, that you look back and you're like, that delay did happen, but now I can see why it happened and why it was actually good that it happened, because it allowed this other thing to happen or this other avenue or road to open up for me that I never would have seen otherwise. Also important to note, this full moon is sextile Jupiter in Pisces, which is really encouraging us to weave in our spirituality into our day-to-day life. And so this could be a good time to look at, reevaluate, especially with Jupiter being retrograde right now, your faith, your beliefs, your spirituality, and how you are tending to that part of yourself on a day-to-day basis. Are you giving the spiritual side of yourself space to kind of open up and breathe and expand throughout your day? On June 25th, Neptune will join the retrograde party and Neptune retrograde begins. And so this is just a time where we can, Neptune kind of gives us rose-colored glasses, right? Neptune kind of makes things seem better than they are. And so with Neptune retrograde, we may start to see things with a little bit more clarity. We may see where we've been looking at things with rose-colored glasses, where we've been too optimistic or too naive about the outlook of things. This is also an important time to pay attention to your dreams. Neptune also rules our dreams and the dream world. And so this could be a nice time, if you don't already, to begin a dream journal. I know it can be tough because not all of us remember our dreams, but maybe if you just even make note every morning of how you feel when you're waking up, that could be some important information to reflect on. And then finally, we will wrap up June on June 27th, where Venus will enter Leo. And this is really, when I said Mars entering Leo was kind of a breath of fresh air, Venus entering Leo is kind of the same, in my opinion. Pleasure and love. We become more generous with how we show love to others. We can become more generous with sharing our money, our finances, our wealth. We really take a lot of pride when Venus is in Leo with our love, with how we feel love, with how we express love. We can be playful, warm-hearted, sometimes extravagant. We can be a little prideful with Venus in Leo, where we may want all the attention on us. And so that's just important to make sure you are giving as well as receiving. Venus in Leo, really, this energy, we like it, that feeling of you want to be adored and admired, and you're really passionate, but you're also kind of really prideful and your ego can be hurt. And so that's just, it's a balancing act of moving through those emotions and, just like with Mars and Leo, it's important to act through and focus your energy on your passions and what brings you pleasure. Venus in Leo is the same, where you really want to, you find value, you find a lot of worth in what you find pleasurable and what your passions are. And so again, you want to not only focus your energy there, but you'll also kind of get value back from that focus, where it's like a feedback loop where you spend your time, you spend your energy on things that you are passionate about, that feel pleasurable to you, and they may not be the same thing. And by doing so, it kind of feeds you pleasure. Like you feel, it helps you feel affectionate and generous and giving by doing so. And so that is the month ahead for June 2021. And like I mentioned, I will not be doing the weekly astrology for June because I'm kind of taking a step back from work. I'm not going to be completely gone. I'll still be on social media, mostly my Instagram stories, but I just won't be doing as much work. I'm just taking a little bit of a summer break. So I hope you found this helpful, and I will be back in July with both the forecast for July and also the weekly forecast. So I hope this was helpful in the